Well, you see why Bugattis is such a cult car. They're just so different, so unique. It's like a piece of kinetic artwork going down the road, you know? It's just such an involving car to drive. You run over a dime, you can tell whether it's head or tails, you know? So much fun this is.
Well, that's Jay Leno's Garage. The car we're featuring today, I think this would be considered automotive royalty. Many consider it to be the most beautiful car in the world, certainly one of the rarest. 1937 Bugatti Type 57 SC. It is supercharged. It has a straight 8 engine, twin overhead cams. This was the handiwork of Bugatti's son Jean Bugatti. Died at age 30, I believe, in one of these, certainly a Type 57. Now, truth be told, engine, chassis is all Bugatti, but this is what you call a rebodied car. It was rebodied in this body style by a man named Eric Knox, who was a huge Bugatti enthusiast, Danish gentleman, him and his friend. They built 2 of these, like the original, all aluminum, but we don't try to pass it off as a real Type 57, because there are only 4 of those. Ralph Lauren's got the best one in the world. You've probably seen that. It's won Pebble Beach a number of times. His is black. His was started by my friend Paul Russell, who just does the most beautiful work in the world. But this is a driver. I drive this a lot. I use it a lot. If you watch this show, you've seen it parked over there in the corner. I don't know, I've had this thing 30 years. It was really unusual when I got it. Now it's become sort of an icon. People kind of go crazy when they see these because you just don't see them on the street. And it truly is, I think, one of the most unusual and beautiful cars ever. Now, this spine has an interesting story. When they started doing these, it was originally called Aeroleith. I think that's how you said it. We had the magnesium car on the show. Bugatti wanted to make it as light as possible, and he made it out of a alloy called electron, which is mostly magnesium with something else, I'm not quite sure. And since it was extremely hard to weld, there are people that can weld magnesium, but not too easy because magnesium can catch fire like that. So the idea was to pin the car, kind of stamp it and then pin it, and that's what they did with the magnesium car. When they decided to produce these, they realized, well, that was way too expensive, way too much trouble. So they made it out of aluminum, but they kept the sort of pinning look here. So that's why you have this spine. So you also have to remember, well, it takes a lot from aviation. You know, Lindbergh had flown the ocean less than a decade earlier. That really influenced car design. If you had a car that had airplane dashboard, airplane styling, that was a big selling point. Because you notice the way the doors open, kind of like a small aircraft, you see? Let me come on the other side, I'll show you that as well. You see how wide they open here. And the way the door is cut into the roof, that's very aircraft. Sort of, I guess you might call it aircraft style dashboard. I remember seeing a movie with Humphrey Bogart. I can't remember the name of it, but he bought a new Ford, and he goes, aircraft dashboard, look at that. Purely aircraft. And everybody in the neighborhood was very impressed with this car. It's really an outstanding design. So many cars have taken design from this. Certainly the XK120 Jaguar, you see a lot of influence here. This was a very influential car. Jean Bugatti was, like his father, an artist. You know, Bugatti was as much an artist as he was an engineer. Let's take a look at the engine here and show you what we're dealing with. As you can, there you go, beautiful engine turned, twin cam, 8-cylinder, 3.3 liter, probably maybe 170 horsepower, something like that. You know, there used to be a magazine called Special Interest Autos here in the United States, and I liked that magazine because they would drive an old car and then they would say, what modern car is this like, to give people a feel of the power. I'm doing that now when I say this is probably about the same as a 289 two-barrel Mustang from the mid-60s, you know. It's extremely light. It's under 2,400 pounds, this whole car. So 170 horse to maybe, with the supercharger, it might be as much as 200. And I think 200 is fair to say also. So that's pretty quick. I mean, when I drive this, I'm in the fast lane, 75, 80 miles an hour on the freeway. You don't want to get hit in this car. There's not a lot of safety features. No, not a lot of safety features at all. It's extremely lightweight aluminum. And if you look up flimsy door in the dictionary, you'll see this. There'll be a picture of this here. Okay. And I love these vents here. While you're driving, you want to get more, you flip those and you get air into the cockpit. It makes all the right noises. You know, the fun thing about this very sophisticated engine, as I said, 3.3 liter, and it's gear driven. You know, most engines would have a cam belt or a cam chain to drive. To set up gears to run your overhead cams, you got to be extremely precise, and it's expensive. But that expense was not really a problem with these cars because they had an extremely rich clientele. Well, I think it's just a thing of beauty. See all the engine turning here. It's debatable whether all the engines were engine turned. Most people do it after the fact because it was considered quite popular and looked pretty cool. But there's your oil filter right there. Here's your filler cap for your dry sump oil. You've got drum brakes all the way around. Now this car is one of the early ones that has mechanical brakes, which means there's no master cylinder. You just have, as Henry Ford used to say, the safety of steel from pedal to wheel. That was his idea to sell. He didn't really believe in hydraulic brakes early on. He later switched over, as most people did, which was easy to understand because, you know, a little liquid in a tube going to your brake. Well, can't that brake? Can it leak? Yes, it can. And it often did. So the idea of having a steel rod pushing the brakes, you couldn't get as much pressure as you could with hydraulic, but it's probably more dependable, certainly in the early days. Bugatti stuck with that a little too long, just like Henry Ford did. Interesting thing about Bugatti, an engineer, and it was really about the aesthetics. If it doesn't look right, it's not right, you know. For example, this whole twin cam idea came from a guy named Harry Miller. Harry Miller was an American who built just the most beautiful front-wheel drive race cars. He kind of started the twin cam deal here. And Bugatti went to a race, saw some Millers, went crazy. A guy named Duray swapped him some Miller engines and cars for Bugatti chassis, which I have over there. And they worked out that deal. People say, oh, he copied Harry Miller. Yeah, but everybody did. You know, engineering was moving very quickly. If somebody had a better idea, you just sort of incorporate it in your car. So I don't fault him for that. Bugatti didn't like to give credit, much like Henry Ford. So he didn't really talk about it, but that's what it is. It's a Harry Miller sort of idea and design, which they copied quite effectively and makes for just a great engine. There's more air vents here. I love the way this hood, you have this, they call it this gauze here to kind of get the engine heat out. Let's go on the other side and we'll show you the supercharger. Okay, your steering gear right here. Here's your supercharger. The supercharger lubricates through engine oil. A lot of Bugattis had a separate tank right here. I'd put two-stroke oil in it that would lubricate the supercharger. But this one runs off the engine oil. This is your fuel pump here. It's an AC unit, which is American, is what he used. I've got a electric fuel pump on this. I've bypassed this, but you see I've filled this with grape juice because I would take it to car shows and I'd say, you know, the car runs on wine. They'd go, really? Yeah, we'll show you. Then I drink it, and it's amazing, yeah. But anyway, that's why it's good. That's why it's purple. Well, you'll hear it start. It's impressive. It's just such a fun vehicle to drive. We've got an electric fan on the front. You also notice the headlights are yellow because they did that in Paris when the city driving. They like yellow lights. There's an oil filler there for the sump. And I showed you the dry sump filler on the other side, but that's to get some oil in the sump. There's a guy named Jim Strandberg. He's probably the preeminent Bugatti builder in the country. He does wonderful restorations. He builds beautiful engines. If you look up Jim Strandberg Bugatti, you'll see a video of him tearing one of these engines completely down, rebuilding it, showing what goes wrong, how to fix it. It's really a wonderful piece of history, and I hope people save that, because if you're interested in these cars, you really should watch that just to understand the thinking that went into this motor. We thank Jim for making that video, and it's really quite helpful. He's worked, I've got a few Bugattis here, and he's done work on all of mine. He just does wonderful, wonderful work. So if you're ever at Bugatti events, you will see him. Okay, let's close this up again. Let's walk around to the back of the vehicle, and I'll show you something I think is really pretty cool. The back of this car is pretty fascinating. First thing most people notice are the tiny tailpipes. And you go, why is that? Is that an affectation? Well, not really, because the car is so low. If you had a big tailpipe like that, a big round one, maybe a little bit bigger than a beer can, you'd be hitting it on the ground all the time. So the idea was having these smaller ones, it gives you a lot more ground clearance. From a styling standpoint, I find this brilliant, this whole circle here. Take a piece of paper and try and draw it, and you can't. So imagine making it out of metal. You know, it's pretty amazing the way it just goes around. It's such a beautiful piece of art. And this is kind of fun too. Let me show you where the spare tire goes. Voila. That's pretty cool. This piece just comes off. I gotta find some places to put it, but there's your spare tire right in there. I don't know where the jack goes. I guess the jack is underneath. Yeah, the jack's underneath the tire, but it's just such a clever idea. And see this, just again, when you put it back, you fit that right in there like this. Trying not to chip it. Goes into place, and then it locks into place. There's your gas filler right there, and of course the two little cathedral windows. Everybody sort of copied that split window. Corvette, certainly. I think when the guys are designing the Corvette, I think part of the inspiration came from this. When you realize this car was only 30 years old when they designed that new Corvette. It was less than 30 years old. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, but we've added a couple of extra lights on there just out of safety. Obviously, no bumpers. You don't want to get hit in this thing. But I just find this whole design here of all the curves just you know, it's one of these things you could sit and look at for hours. There's just so much art here that it's just a wonderful design. It's just amazing that when you're designing an automobile, you can be this creative, because it really doesn't look like anything else that was around in the day. When you look at the 30s, yeah, their cars were kind of humpy looking, but this, it's just pure design, and it's so Italian and French. You know, Bugatti was an Italian who lived in France, so I think both countries claim him, but France really, you used to say France was the birthplace of Germany was the birthplace, and France was the nursery where all the original good ideas came from. You know, Pinnacle system and all that type of stuff. The French really led the automotive field in the first part of the last century. The trouble was, their laws became so restrictive that, you know, high-end, after World War II, they couldn't design any high-end cars. They had to be people's cars, like the little Citroën 2CV. They kind of ruined their own motor industry. But, you know, Citroën, Pinard, I love French thinking and love French design, and they just do such a wonderful job. Let's take a look at the inside. Well, I think it's one of the prettiest interiors. I kind of feel like you're in one of those Ford tri-motor planes from the 30s. Here's your key right here. There's your clock, temperature. You've got ammeter gauge right there, speedometer, tachometer, fuel, and of course oil pressure. These are advance and retard and a hand throttle. This is what they call Kai gas. What this is a pump. Now I have an electric fuel pump, but what you do is you open that, put your key in. That's your fan, and you got headlights and everything else in here. And you pump a little fuel, that shoots it directly into the carburetor. You've got a hand choke here, you've got your horn, handbrake, turn signals, and gear shift lever here. This gives you more air in the cabin, opening and closing like that. Let's see if she starts. Sounds pretty good. Let's take it for a ride.
You know, this thing is so much fun to drive. You know, it's pretty fast considering what it is. I mean, back in the day, this must have just been unbelievable. You know, as beautiful as these cars are to look at, the real joy is in driving it. It really is an experience. It's just so sort of, it's just the opposite of like a big WO Bentley, you know. It's sort of light on its feet. It kind of dances down the road. Everything kind of moves around a little bit, you know. It's really great. This car is so much fun to drive through the hills of Malibu. You know, nice twisty roads, nice two-lane roads. And this is, obviously there's no power steering of any kind, but it's pretty light because you have this big wheel, you have these reasonably skinny tires. So it really makes it nice to handle. On a day like today where it's a little on the chilly side, you get a nice, just enough engine heat coming through the firewall to kind of keep you warm. Yeah, in the summer it's not the greatest, but on a day like today, fantastic. The setup was going to save the company. It was fairly modern by Bugatti standards, you know, and John Bugatti was, I think, almost as equally as talented as his father. They built about, I think, a little over 700 of these twin cam motors. Quite reliable and very powerful. Just hearing the gear wind and the exhaust note, very exciting car to drive. I sometimes get stuck in LA traffic for, you know, an hour and a half in this thing. It doesn't overheat, runs nice and cool. Just good, solid engine design. And aesthetically beautiful. You know, Bugatti, to be right, it has to look right. You know, since you only built 4 of these things, you don't really see yourself coming on the highway all the time, you know. Not like driving a Corolla. Oh, look, there's another Corolla, you know. But you know, the longer you drive it, the more you want to drive it, because you just get used to the sounds and the smell and the feel of it. Well, you see why Bugattis is such a cult car. They're just so different, so unique. Trouble with driving a car like this in LA is there's so much traffic. You've got mechanical brakes, and everybody pulls up next to you to talk to you while you're driving, so it gets a little crazy. But that being said, the brakes are actually okay, not bad. I'm not sure what the torque specifications are in this motor. I can't remember, but it pulls from way down low. I mean, you don't need to rev the heck out of it. Just not a car you see in the industrial part of town, you know? Big semis, everybody pulling up there, they could crush this thing like a bug. I don't understand having something like this and not driving it. I don't quite get why anybody would do that. I guess as art, I guess it's certainly enjoyable to look at. Sometimes I go in the garage and I just stare at it, you know? I mean, there's not a straight line in the thing. Occasionally she'll pop back through the supercharger, so you hear the pop-off valve. Disadvantage is the carburetor is at the bottom. So you don't want to go through a puddle in this thing or you'll hydraulic it. You just suck up the water and lock up the cylinder. But it really has the ethos of a Bugatti, you know. It's lightweight, it's quite flexible, spindly, powerful engine. I love this era when automobiles had nationalistic characteristics. Bentleys are tough like a bulldog, you know. Bugatti used to call Bentley's cars the fastest trucks in Europe but they were built like tanks. That's why they were able to win Le Mans so many times. Bugattis are always like a Spyder, you know, very quick, fast. I remember one of the owners of one of these picked it up right before the war broke out. He got pulled over by the Nazis and he got killed in the car. Another couple, I can't remember his name, he got hit by a train. He and his wife, they died instantly. That car, the pieces were sold off to help build other Bugattis. There's a lot of stories about these cars, but the best one in the world belongs to Ralph Lauren. That one is really impressive. That's got the papers from day one. As I said, it's all Bugatti. It drives, handles, does everything the real car does. It just doesn't look like what it was. This is called a rebodied car. You just build a new Atlantic body. You know, some of these they built with Jaguar XK120 engines, but this one is all Bugatti all the way through. So it makes it not quite a real one, but way more than a replica. In fact, if you use the term replica as an exact copy, that's what this is. Eric Knox did a beautiful job. They made a buck out of wood, the hand hammer. I mean, they just did an amazing job on these, and these have actually become quite valuable. I mean, they're worth 3 to 4 times what I paid for it 30 years ago. And I paid a lot. It took a while to get this car sorted. It sat in the collection for years and years before I got it. So we had to redo the brakes, a few other things. Just generally go over and tighten everything up. Not terrible, just a little recommissioning, but anyway. I hope you enjoyed this little ride in a piece of automotive history, and I think it really is. I mean, it's just one of the most fascinating, beautiful cars of all time. Even people who don't know anything about cars go, what is that? It's just so striking. It's so beautifully done. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed our ride in this piece of history. We'll continue to find more history and hopefully take you out for a ride in it. So thanks for checking it out, and we'll see you next week. So much fun this.